Welcome to Perspectives on Neurodiversity, a podcast dedicated to challenging myths and assumptions about neurodiverse life. I am your host, Christopher Scott White, speaking as the Autistic Me. Today I'm being joined by Alex Plank, an aspiring filmmaker and the associate producer of the film Ezra. I'm also being joined by Dr. Jenny Palmiotto, founder of Love and Autism. We're going to be talking about the film Ezra today. Ezra follows Max Bernal, a stand-up comedian living with his father while struggling to co-parent his autistic son, Ezra. I have to say, first of all, the cast is amazing. William Fitzgerald as Ezra is outstanding, and I really appreciate what he was doing. And as his grandfather, Robert De Niro, just really, it's never said, but it is very clear that there is a genetic predisposition in this family towards being neurodiverse. And so we'll talk about that as well. But Alex, thank you for joining the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk about this film. It's, I think it's a pretty good film. And I think that it's about time that we have, in my opinion, is true autistic representation, both behind and in front of the camera, because, I've seen one or the other, but I haven't really seen much of both. And that's unfortunate because people who are autistic deserve to have their stories told in a way that's authentic to their true selves.
And Dr. Palmiotto, can you explain what Love and Autism is and your connection to the film?
Yeah, absolutely. Love and Autism is a nonprofit that our goal is to shift the narrative related to what it means to be autistic, that autistic people need, and autistic family systems need and want love, connections, authenticity, belonging in the same way that all humans do. And there is some misconceptions, global misconceptions about those very things. And so Love and Autism is positioned to move that social change and destigmatize what it means to be autistic, and that this includes autistic voices as leaders, and yet also that activism must include non-autistic people in this journey to dismantle ableism.
Before I get into the film, I do want to touch on your backgrounds. Ezra is an amazing work, and I do want to spend a lot of time on that. But first, I want my listeners to know that I'm familiar with Alex because when I began my journey, I was diagnosed in 2006, 2007. And one of the things I searched out were places where I could find other people struggling to navigate the world that, quite honestly, does seem like a strange place. And Alex was the founder of Wrong Planet, an online space for those of us who are neurodiverse to sort of connect and ask questions and share our experiences. So, Alex, how did you go from being a computer person? I know you were interested in Linux at the time, online spaces. How did you get into film?
I've been interested in a lot of things. I still am interested in very creative and technical things. I've always been interested in films. I used to love watching movies. One of my favorite movies was The Matrix, which is, about computers. And I was like, okay, well, maybe I'm more into like the movies. Do you know what I mean? Because I like doing it, but I think that telling stories is something that I've always done. I have a sense of humor, and I have a drive to sort of share my experience. And I think, at least in terms of my foray into film, I first started when I switched my major from computer science to film at George Mason University.
That's a big change.
Yeah. And then in terms of doing film, I think that it's in a lot of ways, I think, a very good thing for people who are autistic to do, because there are very clear roles of what you need to do. There are many crew members, I think, that are probably autistic, some that know it, some that don't. There's gaffers, lighting, like the sound guy. It's like he just has to focus on the sound, right? And there's one guy that just has to focus on pointing the microphone at the right spot. And there's one guy that has to focus on mixing the sound. So it's not even just sound. It's like, it's like you focus on your thing. And I think that's, and, there's Teamsters, and they have to, drive the trucks or, handle the wrangle the animals or whatever. I think that that makes a really good spot for someone to thrive. Also, you work on projects. So you can work on a movie, it's just 2 months and then you're done. So you don't ever get that sort of situation. And I think a lot of autistic adults who are in the workforce realize is that when you start a new company, things go okay while you keep your mask up or whatever, and then like you get burned out. So like, I think it's a very good environment for autistic people.
I think back, I've worked on projects with the Joey Travolta Film School, which in Pittsburgh, they did a camp. They're out of Bakersfield, California, I believe.
I know, I've been there. I know Joey Travolta, yeah.
And I really like that what they do is they bring film camp of a week or 2 weeks to autistic individuals so we can learn the technical skills, learn the process of filmmaking. And I do think that a lot of the jobs that are behind the scenes that people never think about are really great for the hyper focus that we have. And yet at the same time, as you mentioned, there's a nice recovery window as well. Jenny, how did you get involved in this film?
Alex and I have been colleagues for, about a decade. And he ended up approaching me and saying, hey, do you want to do a screening of this film? And of course, because of the disability tropes and all kinds of movies and the hero narrative and all of that, I was very cautious. So like you, I wanted to see Ezra before committing. And when I watched it, actually, I noticed I had a lot of anxiety that story was going to emerge, that the story that's everywhere in film and media would end up playing itself out. And it didn't. And it was a powerful and impactful experience for me as a clinician, as a mental health clinician that works with that spends my professional life with autistic family systems, to not only have the representation, but have these universal themes within the film that were very compelling. And I very much appreciated the layered father-son relationships and the nuance within each character and the becoming story. And so when Alex approached me, I was like, this is an absolute yes. I think that this film moves the needle on, a lot of times when we think of lived experience and film, sometimes we just don't have lived experience. Not everybody will be autistic and not everybody will have an autistic family member. And yet understanding and having some version of curiosity and not only acceptance, but appreciation for this journey in life is very, very important. And so I think film really does that. And so I wanted to get involved immediately. And Alex and I, when we've worked together in the past related to love and autism, we created a really dynamic autistic-centered event. And then we're just going to do it so much better in this event, Our Evening with Ezra, where we have intersectionality, autistic people in every capacity of the event, while also showing this very meaningful film.
An Evening with Ezra is going to be happening May 21st, 2024?
Yes.
Where will that be happening?
It's going to be at the Writers Guild Theater in Beverly Hills on Doheny Drive.
Alex is always better with the details.
But you don't have to be in the WGA to come to this screening.
Oh, good. So this is open to the public?
Absolutely.
Yes.
It just happens to be at the WGA Theater.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it doesn't just happen to be at it. We, picked that theater because of, we support the guilds and especially the Writers Guild. And we're going to be doing a Q&A and have a whole autistic centered event with autistic musicians and everyone is involved is autistic, or most of the people involved are autistic and the key participants, I guess you could say.
But let me go ahead and run down a little bit about Ezra. So Ezra was directed by Tony Goldwyn. It was written by Tony Spiridakis. It has an incredible cast, but as I said at the very beginning of the podcast, William Fitzgerald plays Ezra. Amazing. It stands out really well. In watching the film, I saw myself and my daughters in the film. Ezra really is an amazing character and well portrayed. Alex, as associate producer, how important was it for you to have that portrayal of a young autistic be so accurate?
I think that even before I was involved, Tony Goldwyn wanted to have an autistic actor play the character, and that was the only way he would do it. And so, then he got me involved, and we looked at over 100 kids from all over the country. Throughout that process, I was there to ensure that, that everything was good and that the autistic actors felt, comfortable and weren't being put in a situation that made them feel uncomfortable or not having a good time, right? So like, even in the casting, we made sure to sort of cater to the autistic experience and not like the neurotypical one.
What do you mean by that? Because I have an MFA in film. You have a bachelor's degree in film. Film sets can be chaotic. The process of casting can be unpleasant, to put it kindly. So what do you mean by neurodiverse friendly and autistic friendly?
Well, I think that part of it is just giving them the space to do it their way and not trying to make them fit into some sort of stereotype that, we expect of autistic people. I mean, I think one thing that, was something I worked on with Tony was to make sure that, we give him enough time to answer the questions or to do it. Sometimes you would rush someone and, then they would just shut down, right? If you're autistic. And so, just giving, I guess having the patience and understanding that, people might need some time between questions, making sure that we understood what their sensory issues were and like maybe something would happen so that even during casting, we could help setting up them to succeed basically. And then also just looking for like the right things. Cause it's a lot of times there was masking that we would see and just letting them feel more comfortable and not feeling like they have to pretend to be something they're not. Cause the thing that we wanted was what they are.
And I think that when you and I have shared or conversed about this, one of the things that I think this film had to have done well and that you've shared is that emotional safety on set, that each person, including William and all other participants were, treated humanistically with dignity and not as a kind of lesser version of being human or quote unquote special. And so I think that when you do that, what emerges on the screen that we as viewers get to experience is the feeling of watching the unmasked process. Because so often there is that camouflaging, there is that social fake that neurotypical people often expect, get miffed about when it's not there, and have our own internalized ableism related to. And I feel like this is what Ezra, why it was so meaningful and why it hits so right is because you really see that authenticity in the character. And then you see those neurodiversity or autistic traits within the family system as well.
When I was watching the film, what struck me first was Robert De Niro. The grandfather has all of the traits that I see in myself, that I see in some of my family. He's of a generation when neurodiversity was not understood. We then see his biases expressed by his son, Ezra's father. I would say well into the year 2000 and maybe well into even the early 2000s, there was a stigma. There still is in some areas about being neurodiverse, being different in any way with an invisible disability. So how important is it that those characters are authentic like that? I mean, they do represent generational attitudes and they do so very accurate.
I think it's incredibly important. I think that, some people might not like that they act that way. And my answer to that is, well, I mean, do you want a movie that's based in reality or do you want a fairy tale? Because this is definitely not a fairy tale. We wanted to show what it's like to be autistic. I will say that, some people have very emotional reactions to it, but they do like the film, but it is, they see themselves, and I think that's what film and art should do, is to make us feel moved. I think that generationally, I think that was one of my favorite parts of the script when I first read it. I emailed Tony Goldwyn and told him that. I said, that's my favorite thing about this 3 generations. I said, I want to make sure that we also show that on screen because, when you have a script, the movie that actually gets made is, not what's on the paper, because what's on the paper is something that you read and what's on the screen is something that you see and feel. And like, you feel emotions from reading the script, but when you see people like Bobby Cannavale and Rose Byrne and Robert De Niro and Vera Farmiga, it really brings things to life that adds a whole new level.
And I would add that I think that the film demonstrated some of the societal barriers as some of the core problems within the plot or the film, in that they were contending with educational professionals telling rather than being collaborative or participatory. They were putting this young autistic boy into this box of being bad and being disruptive. There was a lot of labeling going on, and there was this kind of very specific educational medical ableism that was. And then you see the family's response to that. Those are those societal barriers that are absolutely part of being autistic now and being a part of an autistic family system that many people that are outside of this don't experience and don't have any reality as to what challenges that those barriers present.
Without giving away too much of the story, Ezra's father, Max, is played by Cannavale. He's trying to make the shift from writing for other people to being his own stand-up comic. He and his wife have divorced. His wife, played by Byrne. I see this so often in our families. The ones we know, going through what we're going through, there are a lot of divorces. There is a lot of tension raising any child. I don't care how you want to label it. Being a parent's not easy. And when you add into it, you're making decisions about psychiatric support, special schools, medication. These become real challenges for a couple. And so this couple is divorced. They're co-parenting. And as you said, Ezra gets labeled as a troublemaker in school. And much of the film is based on that parental dynamic of how do these two parents do what's best for their child when they don't always agree. That's reality.
Yeah. You see the love there, though, and that everybody is taking a big risk for the thing that they love the most, which is the parent-child relationship. You see that in both the couple dynamic, even though, as a marital and family therapist, I think of what's called content and process. And the content is about those fights, the do we agree on medication? Do we agree on educational school decisions? But the process is actually very similar couple to couple in all partnerships. And I do know that the access barriers, absolutely add to marital distress. Absolutely. And that might be result in slight differences in divorce rates. Yet the processes of how they relate to one another, even as co-parents, is absolutely very relatable to, I think, all of us, right? The challenges of making decisions with all intention of doing right by our child.
Alex, I have a personal question for you. As someone who does a podcast and a blog and has for, many, many years now, I get a lot of friction from the autistic self-advocacy community. There's some people out there saying, wow, what you're doing is great. And then you get, obviously, people who just don't like anything you do. How have you navigated being an advocate when a lot of times what we're working with we're working in a situation where you can't seem to please anybody? How do you deal with that?
Well, I feel like I please some people. I don't. Hopefully, you're not. If you're displeasing everybody, but I know what you mean. I think that there's differences of opinion. I think there were differences of opinion among those of us, the people making this movie, right? So, I think that as far as I can tell, as long as I'm just being from my authentic place and not doing something to pander to anyone and not doing something because I'm afraid of how people will react, I think that's just the only way to do it. Because you'll get criticism either way. I do make a point though, at least with this movie, of having a very pro neurodiversity perspective. I am very against ABA. I'm against things of that nature. So that's why I wanted to make sure this film showed a story that didn't sort of put anything problematic in there. And there, the characters are very problematic. Lots of them, almost all of them are problematic in some way, except maybe Ezra. Although, just like in real life though, that where we all have our flaws. And I think that part of what's so special about this movie is that, it is a movie about love and people doing things for love. So I think that you have to understand that, if you watch a film like this, that, it will be challenging maybe some of your preconceptions. And I think that's a good thing, because I don't think that like the current view of autism or of disability in the world is as positive at all as it should be. So I think it's good that we have things that change that discussion.
And I do think that when any time that you're challenging the status quo, as this movie does, and as you spent your life doing, Alex, that's what you contend with, right? Because people are being pushed into fight, freeze when they're navigating change. And so what happens there is we sometimes get that reactive blame or that anger from somebody when we're helping challenge a internalized belief that they might not even know where it came from. And a lot of people, anybody that's looking at any one of our work, is already likely a good person and looks at themselves as a good person. And when we're challenged, when that basic aspect of ourself, our own self-image is challenged, we act in certain ways. And so when I see criticism as I do within the Love and Autism community or within my neurodivergent affirming work, I take it as this is their internal process of changing their assumptions. And it almost excites me now. It used to be very, very challenging for me, and I used to want to hide.
A lot of depictions of autistic characters have been one-dimensional at best, and that's really at best. A lot of works depicting autism have been written, directed, starring non-autistics, to be kind. I have steered clear from a lot of media for that reason. A lot of the media that I'm told, oh, you should watch this because it has an autistic character, or this person is probably on the spectrum, so you'd enjoy it. Generally, that's not the case. That might be unfair to those actors, directors, writers, but Ezra didn't seem to fall into that same trap. I'm thinking in particular, the father, son, grandson, that whole dynamic there, none of it felt as artificial as what I typically see in film and TV. How was that accomplished, and how was that handled by the cast and director?
Alex, you guys had a nuanced version of Ezra. I love this question because it's actually what drew me to this film and this the evening together, because Ezra is so nuanced. The symptoms or deficits of autism, I think that's how media gets this wrong. It's all deficit, 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 and they're so linear or one-dimensional. And I think that Ezra is a really dynamic human being, and each of his relationships are quite dynamic, and that resonated with me and my experiences with autistic people and their family systems. And that is not how film, like you said, I honestly, I steer clear a lot of film representations as well because of that. And this is why I think that this Ezra pushes the needle. It is not just a standalone where it's going to go into these theaters and move out. It really adds to the conversation of what it means to be autistic.
What I'm thinking is a lot of portrayals are either of the child rocking who's selectively mute. TV series with Kiefer Sutherland that had that issue. The son was
touch.
Yes. Yeah. I was trying to avoid it, but there you go.
Right. I saw that and I'm, oops. Okay.
And so I see the rocking child, the mute child, the child who throws things or screams, there's a part of me when Ezra starts where he doesn't want to be hugged. I was thinking, okay, well, but then again, that is one of my children. One of them does not like to be touched. But I don't like to see it's like there's a checklist. Oh, this child is going to be autistic in the film, so will not speak coherently, will rock and shake, and they have this checklist of what they think autism is. And yet to me, the most relatable character, and I keep returning to it because it's the one I understood the most, is the grandfather. The Robert De Niro character goes through everything that, lost jobs, argues, wants his pan, wants to cook with his pan, not somebody else's pan. Those are the things I feel that I go through. And yeah, sometimes I shake or rock or have hard times communicating, but I understood him as being on the spectrum, as being an autistic, to me, an authentically autistic adult who didn't know it or didn't want to believe it, but he was definitely, I don't know, I related to him. And I like that because that was an autistic character I don't normally see in film.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that the other piece of it is that within that, there was these strong relationships, right? And these relationships that were becoming. And as the journey of this movie emerges, you see as each person is gifted the ability to be their authentic self, the relationships strengthened and they could see each other clearer. And I don't think that felt love, that felt sense of connectedness and belonging within a family unit exists elsewhere in films with autistic characters in any regard.
Yeah, I think it's really important to realize that, a lot of times, and I've worked in Hollywood, doing this kind of stuff for, a while. And, the biggest challenge is getting it to be nuanced, because people want it to be like this trope, and like they want it to be like the guy that's like the detective, the alcoholic detective, who's, just taking one last case, who gets off the bandwagon and has to go to an AA meeting and, have an emotional moment. Do you know what I mean? Like there's like these things where they just like, they want to like hit these notes, and like autism is not that, autism is very different per person. And it's also, I think, something that, I am really happy personally to be autistic, so it's like, people need to understand that it is not just like what they're trying to, it's not this like disability storyline where they're trying to, I mean, it is a disability, but the storyline is not necessarily really about the autism so much as it is about the family love. And I think that's what makes this different.
When I was talking about the sameness of the autistic characters, and certainly no disrespect, but the things that get mentioned are the TV shows like The Good Doctor or The Big Bang Theory. And, my oldest came home to me maybe a year ago and said, my friends keep calling me Sheldon. Who's Sheldon? I'm like, I don't know who Sheldon is.
Well, I don't take any offense to The Good Doctor. I feel like the episode that I acted on, was good. But because I played an autistic character, I will say that, the character itself, like over the whole film or series is a sort of a stereotype, and it's not. I mean, I just saw a meme like about how like House, who is like, like a narcissist, is like seems more autistic than the actual autistic character from the show. So
wouldn't you say that media, like this is just the journey of film where each representation hopefully is better? We've been stuck a little bit in autistic representation for like the last 15 years as we've seen characters emerge. Yet each one of those that have been mentioned, and I can think of a few others, there was at least, not an attempt. I don't want to say that, but each one of them moved the needle to a degree. But I think that this one adjusts the needle. I think it pushes the status quo forward so much. And that's really why I had wanted to be involved in this. Because we do see that kind of, it's the DSM checklist because they haven't done the back end work, I'd imagine, or maybe not in the way that this film has.
But even if they do the back end work, I mean, it's like, it's so easy to just jump into those stereotypes. And I think that like, you have to stop that from happening. I mean, there was, they were trying to get him to, even William, they were, at first trying to get him to act autistic. And I said, that's not what you need to do. You need to just get him to be himself. And that was like sort of a game changer for Tony. He's like, man, I was such an idiot for doing it that way at first. Like, I can't believe it. And I was like, no, people don't know.
Well, and I think that is conveyed in the film. There were a few lines, and I won't, ruin those lines because they hit so great, that I just laughed. And I actually was like, Alex, did you write these lines? Or like, how did they hit so like autistic magic? There's a few jokes. And he'd said that the certain ones that I had mentioned were William's contributions. And I just love that. I mean, because it felt so, it did it. That was the thing that I was like, that did it. Nobody wrote, like that wasn't written somewhere else and a massage and trying to make an autistic-like joke. It was. And that was, I think, it is so compelling about the film for those of us that are in this experience.
One of the things that I have received via email and even at conferences is, when you cannot be autistic, you're creative. And I think of all of the actors I know who are autistic, the writers I know who are diagnosed, and some who are not officially diagnosed, but they clearly are also part of the neurodiverse community. This mythology that we can't be creators, that we can't be innovators, and yet I know so many how do we get beyond this idea that we aren't creative artists, that we aren't, your event is going to have autistic artists. That's the whole essence of the event.
Well, and the interesting thing is that's where the rigidity of neurotypicals come in. Because we have heard, or the global perception is rigid and inflexible, and that is bifurcated from creativity for some reason. And that absolutely doesn't yield out in the truth of being autistic. And you know that, and we all know that. And it becomes a way of boxing people. It becomes a way of saying, oh, you're a linear thinker. You must do A to B to C, become, and then the ability to, sometimes we have the, yes, they can think outside the box. And yet that's not enough. Creativity is way more than just being outside the box, but you have to allow for people to be their authentic self, to experience their creativity. That's not a reality for a lot of autistic people. And so therefore, many typical people or non-autistic people don't get to have those experiences of the autistic creator. And that is a kind of a shame for this world, right? And it's absolutely everywhere. The rigidity, or, this symptom makes, and I don't like the word symptom, it limits creativity, and that would make somebody not autistic. And for your own experiences, you don't see that, and you don't see that in the larger world.
But again, I think that's interesting how we have internalized some of these biases too. So Alex, how did your family react when I'm a computer person and I chose film for my MFA. You were in computer science and you chose film. How do you explain to people that I am not a computer person just because I'm autistic? It was an interest, but it's only one of many.
There's this stereotype that we're like the nerds or something, which, I guess some of us are. I'm wearing my Think Geek nerdy Vuitton t-shirt that has, instead of whatever the Louis Vuitton things are, like game controllers and like, science things, and pie somewhere. Is that pie? Yeah, in a chat bubble. But like, do you know what I mean? Like I don't know. I think that like autistic people I come across frequently on films. A lot of the actors I've worked with are clearly on the spectrum. I mean, there's no question about it. But they do well because, a lot of us have been pretending to be someone else our whole life. And some of us don't really get as much burnout in the same way, like for masking. And I don't think acting is masking though. I think acting is being, putting yourself, sort of in the shoes of someone else.
You think that that's just, a great example of ableism, a few comments back, that we're thinking of autistic people being good or bad at something. Like these are two boxes or that they should go into this field or that field, or they can't do this or that. And that notion, if you replace that with any other grouping of people, any other minority group, we'd hear it already, that it's discriminatory. And that's where I think the next journey, the next decade, in the status quo change, the shift is that we can't make these boxes. And many people don't even know what ableism is, nor do they even hear it within themselves.
And they don't want to hear it when you call it out, which is crazy because it's like, even, which, by the way, saying crazy is ableist too. So, but like, you know what I mean? Like, so like we all are ableist is my point. Like, and yet I somehow am insulting someone when I point out that they're being ableist. Because if someone said that, oh, hey, you shouldn't say that fell on deaf ears, or like that's tone deaf because it's offensive to deaf people, like I would be like, oh, okay, I'll think of a different way to say it. I mean, even in the movie, Robert De Niro, he's like, you can't say, the R word. And he's like, all right, fine, I won't say it.
Right.
That's it. That's the end of the conversation. And then he then they have a fight, but I can't spoil anything. Sorry. But it's not about that. It's about a stake.
Right. But if we don't even know the word exists, if that's not even in people's lexicon yet, how, it's harder to contend with, right? You have to describe what this discrimination towards disabled autistic people is. And then people can go, oh, aha, yes, that is in me. And I don't really know where that came from. And I would want to adjust that with this new information. And that's what we kind of hope when we contend with our own internalized and systemic ableism or discriminatory values, that we adjust them when new information is received. And I think that that's also within this movie, that there's these slight adjustments that the viewer gets to have, and maybe not even knowing that they're making those adjustments, maybe not knowing that they are on an emotional journey while watching this film as well.
What I like about film is its reach. I go to an academic conference, there might be a few dozen people in any given panel paying attention. I publish a journal article. I honestly have no idea how many people read Rhetoric Society Quarterly or whatever, but it's not in the millions. But if I do a podcast, I suddenly reach tens of thousands. If I do a movie, I can reach millions. Do a TV show, even with middling ratings, you can hit 4 or 5 million people. Film has a way of reaching more people with a message than almost any other medium. No matter what we in the research community do, a filmmaker is going to reach more people and change more minds. How does working on this film and how does screening this film for Love and Autism, how do those two aspects fulfill a mission for each of you individually? I'll start with Alex. How does this film reach people in a way that you think other messages may not?
I think this film is going to start conversations, because I think people will disagree about the way the film portrays things. And I think that those disagreements will make them inspect their own biases and talk about things and have conversations that change how people feel about autism. And that's why I think the Love and Autism event is so important, because it's a place where people can come and have conversations. We will have a reception. We will have a reception after the screening. There will be music. There will be art. It will be autistic centered. William and I will be on the panel along with a bunch of other people from the film team.
What we also do in the event, and then I'm going to circle back to your question, is that we've created a thoughtful accessibility. Something that I see in events is that we have the sensory room, and it's go over here to emotionally and regulate yourself. Go over here, leave the event. But we did this for you. This is supposed to be really cutting edge. And this event really turns that on its head, where the event is layered with thoughtful accessibility. There is a place within the event that is for quiet reflection, where you're sitting in their sensory experiences like soft rugs and beautiful rocking chairs, where you get to do your movement while also having no expectation of conversation. And in fact, that would be outside of the range but of this space, while also being in the event. We have sashes that you can have for entering the theater, and you can drape across your seat to allow for more space between you and the next person, if that's what you choose. We have a movement section, a play and move. We've got a breathe and unwind section, and we're actually allowing non-autistic people to experience, wow, we all benefit from regulating our nervous systems, and we're teaching within that the autistic person has gotten it right, that these things, having kinesthetic movement, all add to our experiences. And I think this event really gets that right, that all accessibility is within the event and geared towards a personalized experience for all. I'm excited to be involved with this event and the film, because I think that at the end of the day, the themes of the universal themes of human connection and how they're paired with the autistic family system the world is primed for it. We're ready for that. And it hasn't happened yet. And Ezra really does get that right. And that's why I have so much gratitude towards the film and all those people, involved. Alex, I think you did a phenomenal job. So exciting to hear even more about the back end stuff that this film did. Like you said earlier, that film has a reach. And I hope this film reaches a lot of people and adjusts and make those changes that film can do in our hearts, so that, once you make a change in your heart, you can then act on it. And that's what I'm hoping that this film and the event does.
As I said, when we go to a conference, it's just the people in the room. If you're a therapist, it's just the family you're working with. But if you do something in media, you can change hundreds or thousands of lives, and it's just hard to replicate. I wish that everyone could go to every conference or read all the papers and understand them, but but you and I both know that no one's going to read some of the papers in academic journals.
But I think that film is really good because it does change people's perceptions. And I could name so many films that, meant a lot to me. That's why working with Robert De Niro was so cool because, he is sort of a hero of mine, and I got to meet him and his family and, and see him work, and it's just really cool. So I think that people will really like this film.
Having the names attached that are attached to it, Whoopi Goldberg, Robert De Niro, Rainn Wilson, these are names that will bring in people who won't know what to expect, and yet they're going to get this message about family love, and in the end, everything, all of the tension between the parents and all the other people. It's really everyone wanting to help Ezra in their own way. And as you said, Alex, we will disagree with the different choices. You and I certainly have what we believe is as autistic individuals we would or wouldn't want. I've been very loud about my opposition to some therapies, and I know Alex is opposed to some as well.
Me too.
The parents face, those issues are real issues, and to pretend they don't exist doesn't work. But with the big names, people will see this and have those difficult discussions.
You're absolutely right. Or that's what I really, really hope.
So if I might ask before we end, where can people find out information about Love and Autism and your screening that it is May 21st, 2024?
Go to loveandautism.com. And if you can't remember that, An Evening with Ezra is what this particular event is called. And it's easy to register for. There is very limited additional public registration. It's closing on Friday morning. So if somebody can get to Beverly Hills, I don't think anybody will regret this. I think that this is going to be a really wonderful experience for me. And I really know it's going to hit right for the larger community.
I assume you're very proud of this film. Ezra it's a great film. I enjoyed it. It is not, as you said, it's not a fantasy film. It's not a fun film. It's a challenging film.
It's a fun film in a way. I mean, there are lots of fun parts, but there are some hard parts too. And I think that's a good film that has a drama.
I think that we make changes when we're able to be transparent and bold within our own values, right? I think playing it safe has kept us stuck in some of these ableist viewpoints and trying to minimize being clear with our voice. And I invite people to just be clear with their voice and be bold and, be curious about the criticism, because maybe for me, I have to always examine my internalized ableism. And when that seems like it's coming through in somebody's criticism or critique or feedback, I want to invite that. But I also want to challenge that kind of initial attack, right? The initial criticism, because maybe that's just that first stance. And if we go into fight, we're not going to move. But I do feel like boldness is required now. And it's, people like you, Alex, that have been being bold in podcasts like this that have shifted the needle thus far. And it's really requiring a fuller conversation like this film, like Ezra does. So this is going to have that reach that we've talked about. And it's going to allow for a deeper, fuller, and more nuanced conversation of what it means to be autistic.
I know a lot of listeners across the globe won't be able to go to Beverly Hills, but I encourage them to check out the film Ezra. It is a really great film directed by Tony Goldwyn, written by Tony Spiridakis. It is an amazing cast. Again, lots of praise for William Fitzgerald as Ezra. I know the rest of the cast is also incredible, but I do want to give them a nod. I want to thank the associate producer, Alex Plank, for joining us, and Jenny Palmiotto of Love and Autism. Again, you can check out loveandautism.com. Thank you so much for being on Perspective on Neurodiversity.
And don't forget to watch it on May 31st in theaters if you aren't able to make it to the event.
May 31st. So catch that. May 31st, Ezra.
Theaters everywhere. It will be in a lot. I mean, it'll basically be in every city.
So that's great. I encourage everyone to watch it. I've watched it twice. That says something because I don't normally watch movies twice back to back. So it is a great film. Again, it's called Ezra. Thank you again, Alex and Jenny.
Wonderful. Thank you for having us.
Thanks. Bye.